Have you ever seen professional drift racing? It's simply breathtaking, especially when real motorsport gurus are performing. And today, I'd like to tell you about one of them. In this video, you will learn the whole story about one of the most decorated drifters in the world, Georgiy Chivchyan, also known as Gocha. I'll tell you about his passion for cars and how he got into the sport. And at the end of the video, you will learn how one of the most successful drifting racing teams in the world, Forward Auto, was formed. Who is Gocha? On January 21st, 1986, in the city of Krasnoyarsk, one of the most famous Russian drift racers was born, Georgiy Chivchyan. However, Gocha, as he was nicknamed, became popular not only in his native country. He gained attention from all over the world. Just listen to how many titles he has. Gocha became the champion of the Russian Drift Series 4 times, won the FIA International Cup twice, participated in the international tournament in Japan, the Wang GP, and besides, became the champion of Russia and Siberia. In general, it can be confidently said that this athlete is of a world-class level. But personally, what surprises me the most is that Gocha competed all this time in the same car. You can recognize him among all the other racers just by looking at his car, a yellow Nissan Silvia S15, a bright, compact, and very powerful machine. It was on his car that he won all his titles both in Russia and abroad. And today, I will tell you in detail the whole story of his becoming a champion. Childhood and family. It seems that Georgiy was destined to be interested in cars. His older brother loved sports cars, and together with his father, they sold car parts. Naturally, young Georgiy was always around his relatives and helped in any way he could. In his teenage years, he was already involved in selling and repairing cars, as well as being interested in street racing. That's where his story began. Georgiy, as he told himself, wasn't very good at school. He had several C's on his report card, however, this did not prevent Gocha from pursuing higher education. He enrolled in a polytechnic university. Even then, he understood that he needed to study where it would be interesting for him, so he chose the direction related to cars. Getting into street racing and drifting. Early in the 2000s, there was no understanding of what types of racing existed. Everyone around was engaged in regular drag racing, that is, races for short distances. Georgiy and Vladimir were always in that environment. According to the memories of racers, hundreds of cars would gather at night during those times, and they were all, so to speak, made in Japan because Japanese car culture dominated the streets. Naturally, the abundance of sports and loud cars didn't sit well with local residents and law enforcement. But our hero was lucky with that. He didn't get caught by the police, although there were reasons too. After all, he started driving cars when he was still a teenager, not to mention having a license. As Gocha himself recounted, he learned drifting at the age of 16. During winter nights, he raced his brother's car on snow-covered roads. Apparently, it was then that he felt that he really liked this style of driving. However, to drift year-round, he needed a car different from all those on the street. Most often, racers chose powerful all-wheel drive cars, but for drifting, rear-wheel drive was needed. So Gocha's passion for drifting led him to buy that same yellow Nissan Silvia S15 in 2004. He bought it from a Japanese auction. The car had already been slightly modified, it had a differential lock, which is crucial for a drift car, as well as sports suspension from the HKS brand, and the body itself was adorned with a new cool body kit. In general, it was a very beautiful car. However, over time, that wasn't enough, and Gocha began to upgrade his car in every way. Gocha's famous car. Especially for this video, I reviewed a huge number of interviews and articles to immerse myself more fully in Gocha's story. Gocha continued to practice drifting all the time, and over time, he felt that his car lacked power in its current configuration, so Georgiy started increasing it. A turbocharger was installed in the car, new sports injectors, the fuel system was improved, the suspension was upgraded. In general, Gocha spent all his salary on upgrading the car, and most importantly, he did everything with his own hands. And to anticipate, I'll tell you that he was very successful at it. If earlier his car produced a power of a couple of hundred horsepower, over time this figure began to approach 700. However, this is already in the distant future. But where did Gocha get the money for his car? He continued to work in the automotive industry. At one point, the young man opened a small service. and in 2008, he opened his own store for spare parts for sports cars. And this is a very interesting story. In the same year, Gocha decided to take part in a circuit racing. He literally burned the brakes on his car during those races, and new ones couldn't be found in his hometown. That's when he realized that he could start trading rare sports car parts, which became quite a good business. Among street racers, rumors quickly spread that Georgiy could buy some of the best parts in the market, and that's how Forward Auto was born, which I'm sure every car enthusiast has heard of by now. Drift Racing Tsar RDS. As I mentioned earlier, Gocha became very passionate about drifting. But in the early 2000s, there were no competitions in this discipline neither in Krasnoyarsk nor in other Russian cities. And who knows, maybe there wouldn't have been any tournaments, titles, podiums, and glory if it weren't for Tsar. Who is he? Perhaps one of Gocha's best friends, Arkady Tsar. He's also a very popular and cool drift racer. However, today I want to be talking about him. After all, this video is about Gocha. But if you want to hear his story too, write in the comments and I'll make a separate video. So, back in those distant early 2000s, Gocha met Arkasha, and it was this acquaintance that gave birth to drifting in Russia. Arkady, like Georgiy, wanted to develop this direction. And what to do if there are no competitions, right? Organize them yourself. Arkasha became the driving force behind this process. Together with Gocha, they started holding the first competitions in their city. Tsar dealt with organizational issues and Chivchian was involved in judging. Generally, Georgiy wanted to participate in races himself, but he was such a cool athlete that in those years, it wouldn't have made any sense. The first place would always be his, but over time, the level of drifting in Krasnoyarsk finally grew. Gocha got tired of being a judge and he finally joined the race. In 2012, a racetrack for car racing was built in our hero's hometown. Initially, it was not intended for drifting, but Arkady Tsar managed to organize competitions specifically in this direction at the Red Ring. At about the same time, the famous series of tournaments began to emerge, the Russian Drift Series. However, in those years, the competitions were local. That is, they were mainly held in Krasnoyarsk, but over time, races began to be held on other tracks as well. Naturally, thanks to this, the popularity of drifting began to grow in Russia, and Gocha was among those who promoted it, and the participation of the racer in D1 GP gave a special boost. D1 GP. What is it, you may ask? These at the time were the most prestigious international drifting competitions held in Japan, and in 2013, Gocha had the opportunity to compete in this competition. At first, Gocha thought it was simply unattainable. He didn't have a sports car in Japan that he could compete with, so he had to transport his Silvia directly from his native Krasnodar to Japan. And it cost astronomical amounts of money, and renting a car that could compete in the competition was impossible. Because of these factors, Georgiy decided to refuse the trip or postpone it. But then, another person appeared who seriously helped Gocha become one of the best drifters in the world. About a month before the start of the competition, Dmitry Semenyo called Chivchian. He was one of the founders of the Russian Drift series. During the call, Dmitry offered his help in transporting Gocha's car to Japan, and since Georgiy literally dreamed of performing at D1 GP, he could not refuse such an offer. Thus, the famous racer found himself for the first time at the most prestigious tournament among drifters. In 2013, Gocha's performance can be called good. He managed to make it to the top 8 participants, however not without problems. In one of the races, Georgiy made a mistake and collided with his opponent. Because of this, the suspension of his car was seriously damaged and he had to retire from the race. Because of this, he stopped only in the top 8, although I think if it weren't for that accident, he could have taken a podium position. But in any case, the whole world heard about the young racer from Krasnoyarsk. The Japanese literally screamed when Gocha performed, as his style was very cool. At the same time, articles and videos began to appear in his homeland about how the racer performed abroad. And the fact that he managed to make it to the top 8 at the most prestigious drifting competitions in the world showed that the level of racers in Russia is very high. In the following years, Gocha continued to perform at D1 GP. He even built a new car, the same Silvia S15, but only for performances in Japan. Actually, it was kept there. And I want to tell you that although Georgiy did not take first places, his performances were very bright. And in the world, more and more talk about drifting, and then the International Automobile Federation decided to hold its championship in this racing direction. FIA. In 2015, drifting was recognized as an official motorsport. This meant that even larger competitions would now be held. So the FIA decided that they needed to hold their own competitions. However, they were preparing for them for several years, and in 2017, the first FIA Intercontinental Drifting Cup was held. However, Gocha did not make it to the winners that time and took only 5th place. But his friend Arkady Saragratsev managed to get to the podium and take 2nd place. Then, all over the world began to talk about the duo of racers from Krasnoyarsk. But the main triumph for Gocha was ahead. The FIA announced the next competitions, which were held already in 2018. And that year, 3 racers from Krasnoyarsk, our old good duo Gocha and Arkasha, as well as Ilya Fedorov, went to defend their homeland on the track. There were a total of 24 pilots from 14 countries. And the most amazing thing is that all 3 of them made it to the top 10. Ilya took 10th place, Saragratsev 8th, and Gocha even won those competitions with a huge advantage over his opponent in the final. It seems like such a cool achievement that one could quit sports, as finding more prestigious competitions seemed impossible. But as you already know, Gocha became a 2-time champion of the FIA Intercontinental Drifting Cup. He took his 2nd podium already the following year, and it was Georgiy who became the only 2-time world champion in drifting. Gocha and His Team. If you think that Gocha has quit sports and started resting on his laurels, you're mistaken. He continues his training and performances with full force. In 2023, Chivchian took 1st place at the Urdas Grand Prix. By this time, the Russian Drift Series was already considered one of the most prestigious tournaments in the world, where racers from all over the planet competed. So, it can confidently be said that Gocha is one of the best in his field. Georgiy competes in all competitions together with his team, Forward Auto. Chivchian is a co-owner of this team, but what exactly do the forwards give to Gocha? I'll tell you, only the very best. Literally, the team has several highly qualified engineers who can not only finely tune the racer's car, but also develop new solutions for motorsport. Moreover, all their inventions are tested at the highest level, because they are used by arguably the most decorated drifter on the planet. Forward Auto truly proves the quality of their developments, therefore, many participants of Urdas use their services. I'll tell you more, even the drifting guru from Japan, for example, Masato Kawabata, ordered several engines from Forward for his car. That's how cool Gocha's team is. And of course, Georgiy is not the only athlete in Forward Auto. His brother Vladimir Chivchian also belonged to the team, and it was he who instilled a love for racing in Gocha. And for the 2024 season, Devoda Roman and Dobrovolsky Timofey are registered in the team. Naturally, the famous Gocha will also compete for Forward. Young generation. You know what makes me very happy? That the younger generation of drifters is already stepping on the heels of the old-timers. And it was Gocha who brought all these young racers into the sport, together with Anatoly Zarubin. Several films about our hero were released, vividly telling about his performances abroad. And it was Gocha's success that gave him that push for the development of drifting worldwide. It remains only to guess how much longer Georgiy Chivchyan will be able to maintain leadership in this type of motorsport. Well, I hope that very soon we will hear about a new generation that will be able to challenge the old school. Conclusion. In this video, I've told you the story of the formation of the champion, the famous drifter Georgiy Chivchyan. Thanks for watching.